On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Good morning and welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don and I'm the host. And you just heard our guest today, just briefly. So I just wanted to mention, though, before we get into the show today, that on my website, so if you go to 5280lsc.com, you'll see a maturity assessment on the website. And the maturity assessment really is for organizations who are trying to grow, but, maybe running into roadblocks and things like that. And so based on years of experience of helping organizations scale, I built this survey more or less for organizations like you to go through and see what you can possibly improve to help your organization grow. So with that, in this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is AJ Melet. AJ is the CEO of Roanoke, startup biotechnology company formed to commercialize stem cell expansion technologies. So with that, welcome, AJ.
Thanks, Don. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So would you mind just telling the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. AJ Melet. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Roanoke. My background is actually in tissue engineering and specifically manipulating stem cells for regenerative medicine technologies.
Yeah, and then how long have you guys been around? I mean, let's talk about the journey more or less of your becoming CEO as well.
Yeah, so the company's only been around for 4 years, but just a little bit on the bio because all this, I think there's an important context of how we got here. And so just to back up a little bit, I became a bioengineer partially because I was raised by a mom that was a nurse and a dad that was an engineer. So that kind of gave me that hybrid upbringing. And my dad was great at encouraging me to invent and create different things and helping me with that. And so that kind of gave me the motivation to go into this hybrid engineering field. And then while I was in grad school, I was having to grow billions of cells for different projects, and it was highly frustrating. And those that have done it know how awful culturing cells are. And it's nothing like what happens in the body. So out of my frustration, these ideas arose about, what if we could grow cells more naturally? And what if we could do it in such a way where we no longer have to subculture the cells, which is when cells outgrow the vessel they're in, we have to detach them and then dilute them and spread them between additional vessels, and they don't like that. So using Legos as a premise, that inspired me to make kind of a building block idea that when the cells need more room, we just add on more blocks, and that led to the core technology. So, and that's a little bit of a winding way to say, as I got into that and I was in my faculty position, I got lucky with the fact that my co-founder left the university, and it created this opening for us to really explore the technology, to develop a company around it. And thanks to family and friends and a few other things that happened, it presented an opportunity for me to ultimately leave the university and assume the role of CEO. And I've never looked back since. It's been an amazing journey. And we have grown substantially over the last 4 years. We started with the two of us, and now we're up to somewhere between 10 and 13 people, depending on the day. And we are moving into our third facility within 4 years. So just really phenomenal. And so that's the kind of broad overview of how I got here.
And where did the company name come from?
That is a great question. So it's a combination of robin and hawk. And when you take the mythologies behind those two birds, you get message of healing.
Very good. Yeah,
Yep.
it was funny whenever I saw the company name, I thought, there's probably a story here as well. And so, I mean, I guess whenever you were at the university, just to back up a little bit as well, um, and you were, teaching and other things, I guess
hmm
describe first of all that a little bit, because the listeners wouldn't know where you're at and things like that, so that probably help. And then secondarily, I just so did you envision wanting to move to take technology out and then become a CEO, or did this just kind of serendipitously happen?
So it serendipitously happened. So I had no desires or plans to start up a company. And while I was in academia in my faculty role, I was teaching and mentoring medical students because I was at a medical center, and trying to use my startup resources to generate data, to build a lab and whatnot. And for all of my colleagues out there in academia that have done that, they know how hard that is. And even though I was working on research and wound healing, because I was with the Department of Plastic Surgery, I still had this really fascinating interest with the stem cells and this opportunity to grow them more easily and making more of a tissue mimetic substrate and getting away from our traditional cell culture plastics, to make it easy to grow cells and do more experiments. And um, like I said, it was really when my co-founder, she was actually at the other campus with the university working in the core lab. And when she decided to leave, we talked about, what if we were to take this pet project that we had that we both were really passionate about and start a company around it and just see what happens, see what we can do. And it just really took off. And I ultimately it grew so fast that I was forced to make a decision on whether I wanted to continue in academia or continue with the company. And fortunately, I had a really supportive department, and we decided together that by me stepping out of the university, it actually created more opportunities for me to work as an adjunct, and it made it a little easier for us to create a lab space outside the university for this project, but also to engage with the medical students, the residents, and such, and give them new experiences that they actually wouldn't have access to in the university. So that's another reason I decided to do it. Um, and it has been quite unorthodox, but it's also been extremely rewarding because it's given us the opportunity to create new teaching opportunities, to work on a really great technology. And even more so, I really get to engage with different parts of the community. So, with being outside, we work with a lot of high schoolers, we work with a lot of college students, we get to engage with different civic leaders and other companies in our community. And so, it's just a very enriching and fulfilling experience.
Yeah, and I mean, what's interesting to me is that the so a couple things came to mind to me as you're kind of going through this, and I'd like for you to help me kind of clarify it a little bit more. So I've interviewed Trivia Frazier. She's the
Mhm.
CEO of Obatala Sciences. They're down in Louisiana. How is what you're doing different than like the what people are doing with tissue on a chip?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you've interviewed Trivia because she is just a rock star.
Yeah.
Uh, the Obital is a really great company. So what we're doing that's different is typically with like organ on a chip or lab on a chip is those type of technologies tend to use a lot of microfluidics and recreate very specific instances of physiology in the body, depending on whether it's the kidney, the liver, etc. With the bioblocks that Roanoke created, we actually take a different approach where we have a hydrogel substrate that is tissue mimetic. So the substrate is already preformed. None of the cells are encapsulated in the substrate. The cells are seeded into our bioblock because there's these microchannels that permeate throughout the entire block. And then when the cells attach to the surface of the microchannels, they actually interact in 3D and they form their own microtissues. And then by adding additional blocks on, if you think of the microchannels as like tunnels, the tunnel gets extended. And so the cells keep propagating, and the microchannels are large enough that it doesn't inhibit mass transport or anything. So we have free flow of nutrients. And then with the hydrogel formulations we use, we've got really good diffusion of nutrients, even through the hydrogel itself between channels. So we let the cells form their own micro environments naturally based on wherever they came from, be it stem cells from the fat, the umbilical cord, bone marrow, or even somatic cells like cartilage and bone.
Wow. And
Yeah.
then where's the primary use for these? Where do you see the technology being used, in the future?
So there's really kind of two uses of it. So one is in manufacturing. The fact that we can create tissues and kind of skip the whole grow cells, then put them in a scaffold, then have some media formulation differentiate that. We streamline all that. So there's a research aspect to growing tissues for different applications and making new research models. But then there's a manufacturing side where it's actually the biological factors that are secreted by different stem cells that are used as the raw materials to make new therapies. So, bigger pharmaceutical and biotech companies that are trying to find ways to increase the production of those biological factors have an interest in our block because the cells actually are more active and are secreting anywhere from 2 or 3 times more of the biological factors when they're grown in our blocks versus traditional 2D plastic, or even compared to other scaling technologies.
Yeah, I know from cultures that I've had to grow in the past that I've not had to grow cell cultures, but it is interesting to me to know that that essentially you could take a more natural approach and you know make it more healthy for the cells, but also easier on the individual that's having to do it as well.
Absolutely. And we've also made it more plug and play for the individual too. So if they want to do a cull culture on the tissue engineering side, for example, grow cartilage cells in one block and bone cells in another, and then combine them to try to make a cartilage bone interface, it creates a lot of new opportunities and also new scales of economy for pursuing um, novel therapies.
So, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing currently at Roanoke?
So I would say right now the biggest challenge we're facing is one, we're building a new lab, so trying to grow and um, there's it's always a challenge when you have to shut down a lab to move it and then reset it up. So that would be one. The other thing is the technology is so new that it really is a paradigm shift in how people approach cell culture and production. So we've recently changed some of our marketing language, but um, it's just getting people to connect and understand the concept. And now that is starting to happen. But like anything, when you're changing a paradigm, it just takes time. It's
Mhm.
so different. People are so in their ways, and so those are some of the things we're dealing with. But the cool thing is, we've got a lot of great innovators that once they get it and the light bulb goes off, they really get it and they're excited and they want to promote it, and then they're testing it in their labs and even wanting to spec us into their grants. So those things are great. That's how we're getting validation.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you see the biggest opportunities? Where do you see the future going with this?
Well, in the future, where I think we're going to land, or our quickest path to market is, we have some interesting data coming out about how we're actually using the blocks to um, program, if you will, the secretory fraction of different cells. So because the blocks themselves are tissue mimetic, we can alter different parameters and we can change the fraction of different growth factors that basically are secreted out of cells that are grown in our block, specifically stem cells. And so when it comes to um, trying to, say, induce a greater fraction of maybe like TGF beta or some other growth factor, we can essentially program the block to get the cells to increase that output. And that's highly valuable because those are uh, challenging growth factors to get. And if we could do it with human cells more readily than using bacteria, I think a lot of people would be very happy with that.
Absolutely. So, AJ, there are three questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great one. I think what inspires me every day and why I like what I do is I like seeing the people that are serving others out there. Um, Part of why we also founded this company was it was an opportunity to um, create technologies for our service members and the warfighter. Um, so people that use their time to help others, it's infectious. And so I would say that's what is inspiring to me, looking at those people that are trying to do good and pay it forward.
Absolutely. What concerns you?
Well, kind of on the opposite side, I get concerned a little bit about our ability to connect today with how our world is changing. And
Mm.
so, um, we live in a very digital world, very social media esque. And um, one of the things I enjoy is having, a good cup of tea or coffee with someone and just being able to connect on any issue, even if it's something that, I have no understanding of, or maybe I'm on the opposite side, but it's how we learn and how we validate being human is through that connectivity. So I want to help increase our ability to connect again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. I've described this before
Mhm.
in other episodes as well. I remember being on a train going from Tokyo in Japan, out to one of the smaller cities. And as we were
Mhm.
on this train, we essentially were on when all the school kids were getting off of school. So the school kids arrived
Uh-huh.
to the train in their uniform, and they're all staring at their cell phones. And
Yeah.
there were several girls I remember standing around one young gentleman and essentially looking at him, and the only thing he was staring at was his phone. And I remember saying to somebody, that I was with in Japan, I said, I wonder if your population actually will drop over the next couple of years because of the fact that people just aren't paying attention. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy, essentially should be paying attention to the ladies that were interested in him, but he's solely dedicated to his phone and whatever the heck was going on there. And
Yep.
yeah, I completely agree that how we balance our lives and figure out how to continue to make personal connections versus these
Yep.
ones that are all digital is
Oh,
important.
and with that, those connections are important because they're my personal opinion. It's what provides enrichment to our lives, but also just talking with someone will sometimes inspire an idea that leads to a company and something that helps someone. So just that interpersonal connection with others is really important.
Absolutely. And what excites you?
Um, I think what excites me is similar to what inspires me in the sense that I love seeing people that go after really big challenges. So, from SpaceX and the privatization of trying to get the population out there, along with still the public side on NASA, always been fascinated with space exploration. Um, People that are trying to find ways to grow meat using cell culture products as a way to help with the production of meat. Um, I don't know. Those are just things that are really cool because they're really hard problems, and it's just fun and exciting to see people go after them, try to think creatively, try to think outside the box, and it makes me want to do better. And it also helps. I have to say the other thing more personally that excites me is I have the most phenomenal team here at
Mm.
Roanoke. It's incredibly collegial and collaborative. And so every day I get to go to work and work with these amazing people that are coming up with ideas of not only moving the company forward, but also trying to make our community better. And that's just an outstanding feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the space front, I couldn't agree with you more. I remember whenever, you started to hear rumors of the privatization of space exploration, and in part it's a little
Hmm.
scary because, you could turn it over to such a commercial aspect that things, become so competitive that essentially, we don't get anything done either. But you're not seeing that,
Hmm.
right? You're seeing,
Yeah.
advancements that frankly the government wasn't making with NASA. And
Right.
we were stalled for years. Right behind me on the top of my bookshelf back here, I actually have a 3D model of the SpaceX rocket as well,
Oh,
because
nice.
it's pretty inspiring to me as well. um,
Yep.
just being able to see what they've done is amazing.
Yep. Absolutely.
So AJ Melet, thank you so much for joining me today on the Life Science Success
Mhm.
podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here.
Yep. Thank you, Don. It was a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invite to join today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it. And last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.